Good morning, guys. So it's a Sunday and it's about 10 o'clock, so I'm off to a little bit of a late start, but I thought this would be a good time to begin filming a weekly progress log, and this is going to be the first of the new year, which is very exciting. This week I don't have any real goals, but I would like to get a corset finished, and I'd like to make some major headway on the bodice of an 1890s dress. I've got it drafted and cut out, but I want to add the closures to that and the beading and begin work on the sleeves and just really see that come together this week. But if I don't feel like working on that, I do have lots of other projects I can begin on. I also have a riding coat in progress. I've been working on the beading for that for a long time, and I'm finally getting close to the end, so you may see that start to come together. So I'll show you that, and I will show you how it progresses through this week, along with everything else that I'm working on. So let's get into it because I have a busy day ahead of me. This is the bodice for the 1890s dress. It's going to be worn over a shirtwaist / corset cover thing, which is why the neckline is so deep. It will be fully covered all the way up to the neck, as was appropriate in the 1890s. As you can see, I've already cut it out and I've already sewn the facings in, and I've gathered the bottom edge and then added some elastic so it has some give to it. Now I want to get the closures added. There will be hooks up this side, and then there will be 3 buttons at the back. So I think sewing those buttonholes and sewing on the hooks is going to be my task for today, even though that's not very exciting. I am going to do some beading around the neckline, and I would love to work on that today because I know that'll be fun, but I think I should really finish the buttonholes first. I haven't sewn buttonholes in over a year, so it'll be a bit of an adventure. I'm going to use this embroidery floss, which I don't think matches that well, but they will be at the back of the dress, so you won't really see them. The closest store that sells embroidery floss is 20 minutes away, and I'm not going to drive 40 minutes round trip just to get $2 of embroidery floss. Over here you can see the petticoat that I made earlier in this week, which will be worn underneath this dress, and it is layered over a tulle petticoat that I made a little while ago to give it more shape. It doesn't have that much volume on its own, but it does create a really nice shape over top of the other petticoat, so I'm happy with that. And then at the top here, on the left, I have the sleeve mock-up that I've made to pair with this bodice. It's huge, as you can see. I'm going to make a few adjustments, but for the most part, I'm really happy with it. On the right side, I have some lace draped over the bodice. I was just playing with that and trying to come up with the neckline I like for the chemise I have to make. But I haven't finalized anything because I don't actually have the lace I need to be able to begin work on the chemise, so I'm not putting too much thought in that just yet. So yeah, that's sort of the understructure for this dress, and that's what I have so far of the dress, and I'll report back when I have something worthy to show you guys. Alright, so today I want to finish attaching the hooks to this panel. I'd also like to get the buttonholes done on the back of this bodice, since those are 2 things I was supposed to do yesterday and didn't get finished. Then today's new task is turning the edges of these appliques / collar things over, since I'm going to use them for the cuffs of the dress. And then I think I'm going to embellish it with some sequins and some beads. And I'd like to be able to work on that tonight or later on this afternoon. So this is high on my list of priorities, but I do want to get this stuff out of the way first, since it's not going to be fun, and I'd rather have fun stuff to look forward to later on in the day. So that's what I'm hoping to get done today, and I will try to keep you updated because I've done a terrible job of that over the last few days. So all the hooks are sewn in, and I finished the buttonholes. Both of these kind of look atrocious. I've said it before and I'll say it again. I hate sewing in hooks, and I'm really awful at buttonholes. One of my New Year's resolutions is to get better and to make samplers of things that I'm not very familiar with or not very good at, and one of those things is definitely going to be buttonholes because I'm just not happy with how they look when I do them now. So hopefully I will see some improvement on that before the year is up, but for now, they still don't look that great. But I got all the progress I wanted to make on the bodice today. I would like to cut the lining out for the bodice. Potentially I'll do that tonight, but I'm not going to be able to sew it in until the back seam is done up. And I don't want to do up the back seam until the beading is done. And I'm going to do a relatively simple beading pattern of pearls that are interwoven with seed beads around the neckline. And I think I have some TV to watch, so I can get started on that tonight. But I'm going to go ahead and do some work on the cuffs first, since that was on my to-do list for today. It's quite messy in here, so I was just doing a little bit of tidying and setting up some hand sewing that I can work on tonight while I watch TV. And I wanted to show you this. This is the beading for the riding coat that I've been working on, and this panel in particular is one of the sleeves, but this same pattern is repeated on the front of the coat. So it's basically this gold lace trim, and then I've outlined the trim with sequins and filled in any patches where you could see the trim's base with gold sequins, which took forever, and then I've gone through and filled in the lace with gold seed beads. So I'm very happy with how this looks. This is all I have left to do, and then I have to start adding the tassels at each end point of the lace. I'm hoping that I will be able to do that downstairs while I'm watching TV, and so I've prepared a little hand sewing beading station which looks like this. So these are the 4 different types of beads I'm using for the tassels, and they're all on a beading mat. And then these are the beads that I'm using for this. So I'm going to try and get this finished tonight and then move on to the tassels. Okay, I changed my mind about what I want to work on tonight. I'm going to work on the beading for the purple taffeta bodice. I was originally going to do that after I had it lined, so I wouldn't get my thread caught on the beads when I was sewing in the lining. But I'm going to have time to do a bunch of beading tonight, so I'm just going to go ahead and work on this one and get that out of the way, since I want this project finished before the riding coat. Good morning, guys! It's Thursday morning, and I just finished doing the beading on the neckline of the bodice. This was quite frustrating to do at first, but once I got the hang of it, I really enjoyed it, and I'm happy I chose to do it. I think the finishing touch for this neckline is going to be a little bit of lace. So I'm going to sew that on, and then I think I'm going to try and get the sleeves and the lining cut out today, and then I'll move on from there. Over here I have the cuffs. I got the edge turned inward, as you can see. I also moved a little bit of the braid down, so this is an arch instead of just going straight, because I thought that looked a little bit nicer. And I also cleaned these because there were a few dirt smudges on them. So yesterday I washed them with soap, and now they're dry and they're ready to be beaded. So that's going to be my project for tonight. But since I'm planning on cutting out the sleeves this afternoon, I did go ahead and try on my sleeve mock-up once again, and I realized that I needed to take in the lower portion. I've taken it in about ½ an inch at the top, so it's more narrow, and then that tapers down to the cuff, which is left to be the same width. It has to be a certain width, otherwise I won't be able to get my hand through it, so that's why it's so wide at that point. For the bodice, I've decided to use some lace from this bolt that my grandma gave me, and this is Newfoundland lace, which was a brand in the 1940s. And I'm going to go ahead and use this top one since it's really delicate and pretty, and it's in the color I wanted. So I'm just going to cut some of that out and sew it on. So I've gone ahead and altered my sleeve pattern, which is huge, as you can tell. It's about 30 inches wide, and I just shrunk it down to be about 29 inches wide. And this means that I can cut it on the fabric's fold, and it'll only take about 30 inches or 35 inches of fabric to cut out both pieces, instead of the 60 inches of fabric it would have taken if I cut it out this way, since this edge needs to be cut on a fold. So that's excellent news, and it shouldn't really affect the volume that the sleeves have. So I'm going to go ahead and cut both of these out. I do have to add a ½ inch of room on each edge because I'm going to line these, and I hadn't left room in the pattern originally for the lining. I'm also going to cut out the lining for the bodice and the sleeves, and yeah, I think that's it. Got the sleeves and the sleeve lining cut out, and now it's time to go ahead and cut out the lining for the bodice. This went pretty well, but I wasn't expecting it to go badly because it's just cutting around a pattern. But I'm glad to have it done, and I'm excited to get these sewn together so I can start gathering them tonight. I got the bodice lining cut out, and then I went ahead and sewed the lining into the sleeves. So now I have to turn the sleeves the right way out and iron them, and then I can start to gather them. But good morning, guys! So all I managed to get done last night was gathering the bottom edge of these sleeves and turning them the right way out and ironing them, which isn't nearly everything I want to accomplish, but it's a good start. Today I'm going to focus on the lower portion of the sleeves. I have to line them and interface them and bead them and trim them with lace. So that should keep me busy for most of the morning, if not all of it. And it'll be pretty fun to work on since it's all little details, which I love. Also last night I did some beading on this, which is one of the cuffs for the sleeves. It's taken a lot longer than I thought it would. It's fun to work on, but I expected it to take maybe 2 hours, and it takes more like 5 or 4 hours to do a single one of these. so I didn't even manage to get this one finished, but hopefully I will do that today and get a good start on the second one since there are 2 cuffs, so I have to repeat this process. So that's going to be my focus for today, along with the lower half of these sleeves, and I will keep you updated throughout the day. Interfacing is done. I also sewed a guideline a 1/2 inch away from each edge of the fabric, so I'm going to go ahead and fold that inward and sew it down, and then sew the lace trim around that edge. But I did just want to mention that I'm interfacing the top portion of this because I don't want the point to collapse under the weight of the puffed sleeves. I want it to stay really defined, and that won't happen when the taffeta is on its own, since even though it creates quite a lot of volume, it's a very flimsy fabric. So that's why I'm doing that, and I've already told you what I'm doing next, so I'll see you when it's done. So this took a lot longer than I'd expected, as in hours more than I'd expected, but at least it's done, so I can move on to the beading process. But I'm home alone right now, so I think I'm going to take advantage of that and write a blog post and do some beading on the cuffs in front of the TV, and I'll go back to working on these later tonight. I will hopefully do another check-in before the end of the night, but it's honestly just going to be a lot of beading, and it probably won't be very exciting to talk about, so we'll have to wait and see. So on today's schedule is more beading, and I'd also like to get the bodice lining assembled and sewn in, but I don't know if that'll end up happening because this has been really, really slow. It took forever when I was doing it on the bodice, but once I got the hang of it, it kind of speeded up. Since this is on thicker fabric, it's been way more difficult and way more time consuming, so I finished all my beading and I can't even put into words how happy I am. I'm going to take a little break now, and then later on I will work on lining the bodice and I'll show you how that process goes. But yeah, I'm really thrilled to have this part done. I'm excited to move forward with the project. So progress has been made. I got the lining assembled and pinned into the bodice, and then I did up the side seams of the sleeves, and I got the lining pinned into the bottom portions of those. I do have one completely finished that I've sewn the lining into, but this one's just pinned, and the bodice is obviously pinned. So this is going to be my final task for tonight. I'm going to try and get it all sewn in, and then tomorrow I guess I can put the sleeves on and really start to see it take shape, which should be really pretty exciting. And I will probably talk to you guys in the morning. So I got the lining sewn in last night and I'm really pretty happy with it. All I have to do is secure the bottom edge by machine and gather the middle portion right there. But that should be really quick, and then I can move on to gathering and attaching the sleeves, and that's not going to be very much fun because this fabric is quite difficult to stitch through, but it needs to be done, and once it's done I won't have to do it again. So that's what I'm going to work on. So there is a little bit more work to be done on the bodice than I'd realized. I did gather the bottom edge of the lining and baste the straight edges together, but I still have to finish the bottom edge with bias tape and sew up the back seam and sew on the buttons, which is stuff I just completely forgotten I had to do before the sleeves go on. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to gather the sleeves, which will really bug up my fingers, and then once I'm done with that, I'll go back to this and do some of the easy hand sewing and finish it off, and then hopefully later today I can get the sleeves on. So I didn't end up getting the sleeves onto the 1890s bodice last night because I chose to focus on my 18th century riding coat instead. Even though I'm really excited and enthusiastic about the 1890s project, I've realized that there are a few other things I want to get finished before the season of snowiness is over, so I'm going to work on those as well. And one of those projects is this riding coat and an 18th century dress. So my goal for today is to finish sewing all of these beaded tassels. There's still quite a few to do on the jacket. And I would also like to make some alterations to the bodice that will go underneath this and to the shoulder of the jacket. So that's on my list for today. I'm also hoping to get these sleeves attached to the bodice. As you can see, I did manage to get them gathered, and the left one is without any stuffing and the right one has the stuffing, and that's the shape that I'm going for. So yes, my first task for today is getting these attached to the bodice, and I also have to finish the bottom edge of the bodice with bias tape. So I'm going to do that right now. I'm hoping to also get a pattern drafted for the 18th century project, and I have to write a blog post and upload a video today. So it will be a busy day, and hopefully it will be entertaining for you guys to watch. I lied. I spent the first few minutes of today altering the jacket. I just took the shoulder in and the arm in by about 1/2 inch, and then I marked the placement for the pocket covers, which I got beaded earlier in the week, and I think they look beautiful. So tonight's task when I'm watching some TV is to get the rest of the tassels done and hopefully to get the buttons sewn on. So I haven't even finished sewing one of the sleeves on. I've already pricked myself 3 times, and one of them's kind of bad and bleeding, and that's not a great sign. The problem with sewing through gathers and taffeta is that it's a really finely woven fabric, so it takes a lot of pressure to get the needle through the material. And it goes a lot better when you use a relatively small needle so it can pass between the fibers. But that means that both ends of the needle are quite pointy since it's so small, and that means that you can ram the eye of the needle through your finger, which I've done multiple times. I'm going to finish sewing this sleeve on, and then I'm going to try the bodice on, and then I might end up doing something else that's a little bit more gentle on my fingers, and getting the second sleeve sewn on tonight when they're in a bit of a better state. So 2 things have happened since I last checked up. Number 1 is that I have another injury thanks to a pair of scissors. Not having a great day today. But the other thing is that I began work on the 18th century bodice, and I went ahead and removed the beads from the point that I'm going to take in, and I also secured the beads 2 inches away from that area so they won't unravel. And then I've backstitched over that point several times so the stitching that secures the lining won't unravel when I cut it at that point. Usually with something like this you could just take it in and leave the fabric folded underneath it, but since this fabric is quite thick, I don't want to do that. I want to trim the seam allowance, and that means that I have to make sure everything is secured properly. So now I'm just going to take it in, and then the shoulder will be 1 inch smaller and it should fit properly, which is exactly what I need. And later I'm going to take a much needed lunch break, and then I'll get back to work later in the day. In the meantime, while I'm downstairs, I'm going to work on my blog post that goes up tonight, as well as doing the tassels for the riding coat. I have 5 tassels left to do, and these are the beads I'm doing them with. Each tassel has 8 dangly pieces to it, and that's 2 of each type of bead I have. So there are 2 strands of this type, 2 strands of this type, 2 strands of this type, and 2 strands of this type. It's a really time-consuming process, but it can be quite fun, so I'm looking forward to doing that and getting it finished and feeling productive, because today hasn't really gone how I planned it. I managed to get both sleeves on, which I'm very happy about. The second one went way better. I ended up using pliers, they're just beading pliers, to pull the needle through at any portions where it got stuck, and that made it way easier on my fingers. I survived without doing any further damage, which is really good because I don't need to have another finger out of commission. I think I'm going to switch over to working on the 18th century project, add a few more beads to that, and tack down the stitching and just fix it up a little bit so I can begin work on the sleeves for that tomorrow. But yeah, I'm happy with this, but I have realized it's going to be quite difficult to get it on since it's very fitted in the chest and it doesn't open that far in the back. So I think I may have to undo that back seam and add a couple snaps so it undoes more than just the 5 inches. It looks nice when it's on because it is so fitted in the chest, but that makes it very difficult to get it over my shoulders and get my arms into the sleeves and then to get it off again. And I don't really want to have to worry about that when I'm potentially wearing a wig and a bunch of under things that make it more difficult to move. So that'll be a task for tomorrow, and in the meantime I'm back to work on the 18th century project. So here you can see the new seam that I've done to take in the shoulder, and then underneath you can see the seam allowance that I've just tacked down. It's still a frayed edge, but I think it will be okay. I can always cover it with bias tape later on if I want. And then over that seam point, I just rebeaded it so it's a continuous strand. And I think that looks much nicer than I was expecting, and it should fit much better now, which is a plus. So pretty much everything is off my to-do list except for finishing the tassels on the riding coat, which I'm going to do tonight, and drafting the sleeve pattern. And I've actually decided not to draft the sleeve pattern because I think it will be better to do that once I have the riding coat partially assembled and can really see the length of the sleeves on that, because I can't adjust the length of the sleeves on the riding coat, but I can decide how long these sleeves are. So I want to wait to do that until I have more information. So that's it for tonight, except for the tassels, which I'm going to do now, and probably do that while watching some Downton Abbey. And if I finish all of those, I might be able to secure the buttons onto the riding coat and maybe even go back to working on the cuffs for the 1890s dress. So it's actually turned out to be a really productive day despite the interruption of the finger injuries, and hopefully it will continue to be so tonight. And I will update you tomorrow. Look at this heap. This is probably 100 hours of hand beading right here, which is kind of insane, but I did the math last night and I believe that's how long it took. Last night I got all of the tassels finished and I put on most of the buttons, but I do still have to add the buttons to this panel and to this panel. I'm going to go ahead and finish putting on the buttons now, and then I'll have to decide what to work on next. These are the buttons I'm using. They are from Etsy and I think they match the trim really nicely, so I've decided to use them on this. So here's a finished panel. I managed to get all the buttons sewn on, and then I also sewed on the pocket covers and sewed buttons onto those. So I'm really pretty happy with that. I think I'm at a point now where I can start to get it assembled, which is really, really exciting. So that will be a task for later on today. So I got the sleeves cut out for the 18th century dress, and as I said yesterday, I think I ended up basing the pattern off the one I used for the riding coat sleeves. I just shortened it and narrowed it a little bit. So later on today, I'm going to hem these and line them and hopefully get the ruffles and beading attached to them so I can sew them onto the bodice tomorrow. And I've added all of those things to my to-do list. And I want to get the corset lining cut out and sewn in. I don't think I've actually showed you the corset yet, but it's almost done, so I'd just like to get that finished. So I have hemmed and sewn the trim on and begun beading the 18th century sleeves, but I've just realized that this is something I can do downstairs, so I'm going to switch to a different task for the time being and work on this when I go downstairs for a break. I'm just using fake 4mm, actually these might even be 3mm pearls that I got on Etsy a long time ago. That's what's going on now, and as I said, I'm switching on to something else. I'm probably going to cut out the lining for the riding coat and for the corset. And so that's it for this video. This was a really productive week for me. I don't know if it translated that way on camera, but I got the most time-consuming part of 2 projects finished. I did so much beading this week. Even on days where it may have looked like I didn't do very much, I was spending between 3 and 5 hours in the evening hand sewing just to get the beading finished. So I invested a lot of hours into my projects this week and I'm really pleased with what I got done. I'm really excited to have the bodice finished for the 1890s dress. I really like how it turned out, and I'm also happy that I got the corset finished. Along with that, I got all the beading done for the riding coat, and I got the tassels on, and I got all the buttons on, so now it's just a matter of constructing it, which should be the easy part. So I'm really pleased with this week as a whole. As I said, I don't know how much work you actually saw being done on camera. On the days where it looks like I didn't do much, I was spending a lot of time beading. So it was a very productive week, and I'm really pleased with what I got done. And I'm so glad you chose to watch this video and to come along with me, and I really hope you enjoyed it. Thanks again for watching, and I will see you next time.